Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm so glad that all of you could join. I'm Swati. I'm a project manager with SeasonWatch. I'm joined here by my colleagues Geeta Ramaswamy and also Sai Girdhari. They're both here on the call today, and hopefully you'll get to interact with them during the Q&A later. So I'll share my screen now, and hopefully all of you will be able to see my whole screen. Just give me a minute to do that. Okay, so before I begin, I actually wanted to ask you if you know what this frog is. Can you name this frog? You can use the chat box to respond, and also which time of the year you see or hear these frogs. If you can tell us in the chat.
Binoy says bullfrog and season is monsoon.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so that's actually correct. Both season as well as the species is correct. So this is a bullfrog. If any of you know the Assamese name, please also type it in the chat, and I'd like to know that. So these frogs, you get to see or hear them as soon as the first rains arrive. And hundreds of them start calling. So their call is very, very deep, like a gong. And many hundreds of them will be calling from paddy fields, from the wetlands. And the individual we see on the screen is a male. So they turn this, into this bright yellow color during the breeding season, and they call out to attract females. So there's a very strict seasonality to when you get to see these to see these animals and to hear the calls of these animals. What about this bird? Do any of you know what this species is? It's become very iconic in the recent years.
Binoy says it's a falcon species. Binoy, do you know which falcon?
Yes, falcon is correct. Which one?
Okay, Teke says that it's the Amur falcon.
Okay, great. That's correct. So this Amur falcon has become really iconic in the past few years. So this species starts its, it does this, undertakes this long migration every year. So like clockwork, it starts its journey from its breeding grounds in Siberia and China, and then travels all the way into southern Africa to winter there. And along the way, it stops in Nagaland, and it appears just in time to feast on emerging termites. So I'm sure at least some of you would have witnessed this phenomena where you'll have thousands and thousands of termites filling the sky, and several hundreds of these falcons are around, swooping down on them and then catching them. That's how they hunt their prey. So there is again a very strict seasonality to the migration pattern of the species. And it happens every year when it travels from its breeding grounds to its wintering grounds and again back to the breeding grounds. What about this tree? This many of you would have seen, especially along the highways in Assam. During the winter time, you would have noticed this bright red flowers, that come out on the tree when the tree is nearly leafless, like it sheds all its leaves, and then it gets covered in these large red flowers. And I'm sure many of you have seen this sight. It's quite beautiful.
We have two responses, Shimulu and Shimal.
Okay, yes, that's correct.
Yes, in Assamese, it is called Himolu actually.
Okay, nice. So quite some variation there, no? Very similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, very nice. That's correct. All of those are correct. So this is, in English, it's known as red silk cotton, or Bombax ceiba. So like I said, you would notice it flowering during the winter time. I think maybe during January months in Assam, if I'm not wrong. And then very quickly the flowers turn into these fruits. These are unripe fruits that or pods. And when the fruits mature, they become brown and then they split open. So they just like dehisce and release seeds that are attached to this, this cotton-like material. So on once the winter is over and it's becoming dry and warm and there's wind blowing, these seeds are released, and then using this cotton-like material, they fly to places where they can germinate and grow. So this flowering, fruiting, fruit maturation, and even shedding of leaves, like I mentioned, and then renewal of leaves in the tree they are all very seasonal events, and they happen every year. So with these examples that we saw, this breeding and migration in animals and birds, and flowering and fruiting in plants are cyclic events that happen, that are planned with seasons in a year, and study of these events is known as phenology. Now, why is it important to study phenology? We all know that farmers, especially, they plan their crops with according to the seasons. And we saw that animals and plants, they plan their lives, their breeding time, their migration time, flowering and fruiting time, also with seasons. So if there is any change happening in these seasons, it's very likely to affect the lives of animals and plants around us. And therefore, it's very important to understand phenology, to understand any kinds of changes that might be happening to the seasons themselves, which is very likely, under in a climate change, under, I mean, we keep hearing about climate change, and that affects weather patterns and seasonal patterns. And therefore, to understand climate change, it's very important for us to understand these life events in the lives of animals and plants. And that is what I'm going to be talking about today. How we can observe trees and phenological events in trees, such as flowering and fruiting, to understand climate change. So nowadays, we also, hear a lot about changes happening in the flowering and fruiting of trees. So there's this example, there are these examples here that I'm showing today. The rhododendron tree is found in the Himalayan region, and especially in the Western Himalayas, in Uttarakhand, people call it burans. And they're reporting that it used to earlier flower during at the end of the winter, so during March-April time, but now people are observing that it's flowering as early as January. And this is another species, mango, which is very, very familiar and commonly planted in India, in home gardens, on roadsides and in orchards. And people love these fruits. They come out, in summertime, and everybody just loves to enjoys eating these fruits, right? What now, because it's so well known, people are now reporting. Sorry about that. I have a noisy street in front of me. So people are reporting that the fruit crop itself is not in the volume is reducing. So the fruiting is happening earlier. So there is anecdotal evidence now where people are saying that the mango trees are fruiting earlier, especially in southern India, and also the fruit crop itself is reducing. Then there's the third species, Mahua or Madhuka longifolia, which is a very important tree in central Indian economy. And people there, they collect the flowers of these trees for sustenance as well as to sell in markets as a source of livelihood. And local people are now noticing that, again, the volume of the flowers that is being produced on the trees has reduced in the past few years. So there are these, changes that are happening in the flowering and fruiting time, as well as in the volume of fruits and flowers that is being produced. And and we know that there are so many animals and birds that are dependent on trees, so it's very likely to have downstream effects on the lives of those animals and birds that are connected and linked to the trees. So let's look at one example to understand that. So this is one food chain, an example from a temperate region. Just 1 second, sorry. Sorry, that's my dog in the background barking. So yeah, so this example of this food chain comes from the temperate region, especially from the Europe. So there is this pedunculate oak, the species that it sheds all its leaves during the winter time, and then the fresh leaf buds and fresh leaves appear during springtime. And these buds and fresh leaves are eaten by the larvae of winter moth. And these larvae in turn are eaten by the growing chicks of this bird called the great tit. So Buse and team, they studied this food chain, and they wanted to look at, under a climate change scenario, what happens to this food chain. So we all know that the temperatures are increasing across the world. So they looked at what kind of effect the rise in temperature has on these different living beings. So when they increase the temperature, they observed that the leaves of the pedunculate oak were appearing earlier than they would otherwise. And then what happens to the winter moth larvae? Well, fortunately, the winter moth larvae also adjusted its life cycle, and it came out in sync with the appearance of the leaves. And therefore, when it came out, it still had its, the main food resource available, and the larvae just did fine. Great tit, on the other hand, are likely to be nesting at the same time as earlier. And when the chicks come, what happens is that they have already missed on the peak growth time of the winter moth larvae. So when they come out, they have fewer larvae to feed on, and the larvae that are available now are also smaller in size. So as a result, what happens is that the chicks, their growth and development is affected. They're smaller in size, and very few of them actually then survive to adulthood. So with this example, we see that how change in season in a climatic parameter affects the life of a tree, and that in turn has downstream effect on an entire food chain. And therefore it's important again to really understand how the lives of animals and plants are changing around us in the long term. So to study phenology in the long term, to understand how that to understand anything about climate change. So now we look at an example of long-term phenological data from one tree species. This is this is cherry blossom. Many of you might already be familiar with it if you've traveled, especially to Meghalaya, which is in the neighborhood. So there, so but this example, the data example is coming from Kyoto in Japan. So there, people love to go out and see these beautiful pink blooms, especially when the trees are in full bloom during springtime. So people go out with their friends and family, and they spend time under their trees, picnicking, and just watching the trees. And because people love this tree so much, they have been recording what time these trees produce, come in full bloom for hundreds of years. So we see in this graph here that people in Kyoto have kept records for, over 1600 years. And scientists have then now, collated that information and presented in this graph, where we see that these cherry blossoms are, historically for over 1200 years, they were flowering between 10th and 20th April. So for most part of history, the trees were flowering between 10th and 20th April. And only very recently, in the last 50-60 years, this flowering time has shifted earlier. So now the cherry blossom seems to be flowering between 1st and 10th of April. And this shift is connected to climate change. So we see that, we to really understand tree phenology and how it is changing, we really need to be looking at long-term data, years and years of data. And we also need to be looking at data from large geographic scales, large spatial scales, that is from different places. So to understand that, let's look at one more example. This example is from a citizen science project called the USA National Phenology Network, or USA NPN. Now, what is a citizen science project? These are citizen science projects are projects where, they look at certain environmental issues that are important for people or society, and anybody, even if whether you have a science background, you're a professional scientist or not, can help start these projects or contribute to them. So one such project in the USA monitors the appearance of fresh leaves in species of lilacs and honeysuckles, and that is the data that is presented in this map. So what we see here is that the areas, this is the entire map of USA, and the areas that are appearing in red are places where the plants are producing their leaves, fresh leaves, nearly 20 days earlier than what is historically known. And in all these blue areas are areas where plants are producing their fresh leaves nearly 20 days later than what is historically known. So with again this example, we see that it's not enough that we know that what a particular species of plant is doing in one place, but it's very important for us to know what it's doing in multiple places, because might be behaving very differently in different places. Like we see in this example, where these plants seem to be have their leaves are coming out earlier in some places, and then they're coming out later in some places. So therefore it's very important that we look at tree phenology over multiple years as well as in multiple places. So let's come to India and try and look at some of these things to understand where we are. Now in India, we don't have, any historical records on when the tree species flower or fruit. But what we do have are these very nice cultural associations with certain tree species. So in different parts of India, we celebrate festivals that are linked to flowering events in some tree species. So here are some examples. The first is Indian laburnum. Many of you will actually be familiar with this. In Hindi, it's called Amaltas. I'm sorry, I don't know what's the name in Assamese. If any of you know, please let me know in the chat.
I think it is called Hunaru.
Okay, thanks, Murmita. Okay, so this species, Hunaru, it produces these lovely yellow chandelier-like, blooms, and it's closely linked to the celebration of New Year festival in Kerala, and I'll be talking about that in more detail soon. The second species is the flame of the forest, or Butea monosperma, and this is linked to the festival of Holi, which is celebrated in the northern parts of the country, where people use the flowers to produce the color which is used in playing Holi. The third is neem, and the flowers of neem are used to prepare certain dishes during the New Year festival celebrated in Karnataka, known as Ugadi, and in Gudi Padwa in Maharashtra. So because people, they use these flowers for their cultural festivals, they are noticing that the flowers are oftentimes not available when the festivals come. So either the trees have already finished flowering, or very few flowers are available during the time of the festival. And this is a recent change. They're noticing that this has changed in their lifetimes. And therefore, we can use the timing of these festivals as a baseline in the absence of the historical record, and we can measure how the flowering time is changing at present and in future. So this brings me to a citizen science effort in India, SeasonWatch. And SeasonWatch is a citizen science project where we are monitoring flowering, fruiting, and leaf appearance in trees, common trees of India. And it's anyone from anywhere in India who's interested in trees and looking at seasonality of trees or understanding climate change can take part and contribute to this effort. So far, we have over 460,000 observations that people from across the India have contributed to the database in more than 90,000 trees. We have over 1,200 individual as well 1,200 school participants who are contributing to the project. And people can use either our website, which is www.seasonwatch.in, and or our app, which is available on Play Store. And Monmita had shared, I think she had shared that it's available, and some of you who would like to try can try it out. So it's you can download it for free from Google Play and try it out. So participants use the website and the app to upload their observations to a common database, which can be explored by anybody on the website. So you can go to the website and you can look at explore and just play around with the data. And for any species that is of interest to you, you can look at their flowering or fruiting patterns. You can choose select a phenophase that you're interested in, select the years that you are interested in looking at, the state that you're interested in, and then you can play around with the data and explore the data. So now I'm going to take you very quickly through the process of participating in SeasonWatch. So how do you get started? First, you'll have to register with SeasonWatch. So you can register either using the app or website. Both are very similar. I'm going to, in this talk today, show how you can use the app, because most people, we all have phones these days, and it's just really easy to do this on the app. So you download first to download SeasonWatch app from Google Play. This app is available only for Android phones at the moment, not for iOS. So you download the app, and then you have to you come to the screen, and then you register yourself. So you can enter your name and email address, give a password, and you also have to select a category as a user. So whether you're participating as an individual, we also have some schools and some colleges who participate, take part in SeasonWatch, and therefore there are different categories available. So you can select an appropriate category and then register. Once you've registered, you can then go back and log in. And then once you log in, you come to your dashboard, and you'll see on your dashboard these two options available. You won't see any, these are all the trees that are showing, but as a new user, this will be empty for you, and you'll be having, in the next step, you will add some trees, and those trees will appear here. So how do you add a tree? Once you've registered, you go to your dashboard and select this plus icon. I hope all of you can see. It'll be on your dashboard. You choose a plus icon, and then you can, in this search bar, you can type the species that you're interested in monitoring, or you can also select a species from the drop down. So in SeasonWatch, we have close to 140 species that you can choose from. These are common species available across India. For Assam, we have added a few species that was suggested by the ecoNE team. So if there's any other species that you think are very common in your area and you would like to monitor them, let us know. Munmita know, and then we can add those species. So you select the species that you want to add. Once you've selected the species, you have to tell us where the species is located. So on the map, you choose the street on where your tree is located, and there has to be appropriate zoom level for that. Once you've done that, you also tell us where, some habitat of that tree. So whether it's on roadside, it's in a forest or campus or garden or park, and you give a nickname to your tree. So this is a mandatory field. So you can use a nickname based on a name that you really like, or it can be something that you can use to place your tree as to where it is. So it's possible that maybe you are let's say monitoring two shimul trees, and one of them is on the right side of your house, the other is on the left side of your house. And so you can use that this field to sort of like try and name them appropriately, so that you remember next time which tree you have added. Once you do all of that, you check all the information that you've provided. Everything is correct, you can add the tree. Now this registration is done only once. Adding a tree is done once. You can add multiple trees, but any one tree is added only once. The next step now is to make an observation. Now, how do you go out and observe your tree, and what is the information that you need to record, and how do you upload that information? So let's look at one example. This is a Butea monosperma tree, and you can see that it has many flowers, and it has flower buds. So it should you should select a tree that that is mature, that is, it has produced, it is old enough to produce flowers and fruits. So if it's very small, it's like a sapling, you cannot select that. it has to be a mature tree that is old enough to be flowering and fruiting. So this tree is flowering. We can choose this tree, like in this example, we'll choose this to observe and record the information. So you look at the tree and you try and stand in a place where you can possibly see the entire crown of the tree, or you can move around and see the entire crown of the tree. Now you visually divide the crown of the tree into a sphere, and then this visually divide the sphere into 3 equal parts. And then in each part, you have to count different phases of the tree. So what are the different things that you have to count? You have to look at leaves, with fresh leaves, mature leaves, old leaves. You have to look at flower buds and open flowers, and you also have to look at unripe and ripe fruits. So in this tree, we don't see any leaves. There are no fresh leaves, no mature leaves, and we record that using the app. So you see this leaf icon. This is where you're recording your leaf information. So you say there are different colors for different leaf phases. So you mark them all none because there are no leaves present in this example. For flowers, we have two phases to record, buds and open flowers. And this tree has several buds, especially on the tips of the branches, and it's covered in flowers. So we say that there are many buds and flowers. So these flowers and buds, how do we say many, by the way? So sorry, I forgot to mention that. So we visually divide the crown into 3 equal parts. Now in each part, we have to count, we have to look at these phases. So if, let's say the flower buds are present in only one of these parts, one of these 3 parts, then we count that as few. But if it is present in more than one part, we count that as many. So here the buds are present in all 3 parts. So we've counted that as many, and flowers are also present in all the 3 parts. We've counted that also as many. So I hope that is clear. It's quite simple, but if there is any confusion, you can ask me again later and I'll explain it again. Similarly, the last thing to look for are fruits, and we don't see any unripe or ripe fruits, and both are marked as none. We save this information. And that's all. This takes about, once you get a hang of it, it takes like 2 minutes to upload this information. So we have who are our main participants. These are school children who are observing trees in their school campuses, and individual participants who are looking at trees in their neighborhoods. And school participants mostly use the website to upload their observations, and individual participants mostly use our phone app to upload their data. Now let's look at where what this data is. What does it look like? So first of all, which species do people like to observe? So the top 4 very popular species in our database are jackfruit, with more than 50,000 observations from over 1900 trees. By the way, this data is from between 2014 and 2019. That's what is presented here. And jackfruit is the most popular. After that is mango with more than 45,000 observations, followed by tamarind and amla. And you can notice that all of them are trees that are really loved for their fruit. People really like to eat the fruits. So I mean, there's no wonder that a lot of people go out and look at these trees. Where now, yeah, so these are the different species. I should also mention that a lot of this data comes from the state of Kerala, and therefore jackfruit is like the number 1 species that is being monitored because it's just loved by people in Kerala. Now we look at the data from one particular species, mango. So what are we learning about mango from monitoring its phenology? First of all, we are learning, about the flowering and fruiting pattern over time in the species. So in this graph, you can see that, there's weeks on the x-axis, and then the y-axis or the vertical axis is where the percentage of trees in a particular phenophase have been are displayed. So you can see that there is a very distinct peak in the flowering season of mango. It happens sometime around the 12th or 12th week in a year, which will be sometime in March, April. And then that peak in flowering is very tightly followed with a peak in fruiting, which happens sometime around maybe the 18th, 20th week in a year, and that happens to be in April, May time. So the mango trees, how come they're fruiting so early in April, May? That's because a lot of this data comes from Kerala, and in Kerala, mango trees flower and fruit earlier in a year. But what is happening in the rest of the country? We'll look at that also a little later. So, like I mentioned, Kerala contributes most of the data, and therefore it's no surprise that we saw that, mango seems to be flowering and fruiting earlier in the year. What are the other states that are top contributors? Kerala is followed by Andhra Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and Meghalaya. So these are our top 4 contributing states in terms of data. Now, yes, let's look at mango fruiting in the rest of the country. So this data is from 4 BioBlitz events that we conducted between December 2018 and September 2019. A BioBlitz event is when we basically ask people to go out over 4 days during this time to go out and look at as many trees as they could and report their flowering and fruiting. So this data is presented here is of fruiting trees, mango fruiting trees. So the gray dots are all the mango trees that were seen during that event, and the yellow dots are the trees that were fruiting during that event. So you can see that in December 2018, there is very little fruiting, and most of it is happening only in Kerala. Then in March, there is some fruiting happening in different parts of the country, but it's very low. June is when there is a lot of fruiting happening in the country. Nearly 45% of the trees that were observed were fruiting during this month, and it's happening across the country. So June seems to be the month when mango trees are fruiting across the country. And by September, fruiting is nearly over with hardly just 1% of trees fruiting. And again, it's restricted to Kerala. So with the data on one species, we can also learn about how what the fruiting and flowering patterns are in time as well as over space. What we can also start, what we also want to see is whether there are changes happening in the timing of flowering and fruiting. Like what we discussed earlier, that people are noticing that there are changes taking place in the flowering and fruiting. Whether can we start to detect those kind of changes, because that will be very interesting. So for that we look at this example of Cassia fistula from Kerala. Sorry, I think Munmita, you told me the local name of this species and I seem to have forgotten. Can you tell me again the Amalthas, the Indian laburnum?
Acha, this one Hunaru, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So this particular species is, like I had mentioned earlier, it's related, it is closely linked to the celebration of New Year in Kerala. So that New Year festival there is known as Vishu. It happens mid-April, and that's the time when these trees are supposed to be supposedly in full bloom. So people collect these flowers from these the bright beautiful flowers, and they bring them to their home, and then they decorate the deity and their homes with these flowers. So what people have been noticing lately is that when the festival of Vishu comes, there the flowers are not available for them. So very few trees are flowering, or or they have to sometimes go and buy flowers from the market. Some people even have to use plastic decorations during the festival because they cannot find the real flowers. So they and therefore, because it's such an important festival for people, people are really concerned about what's happening to this tree. So we're going to be now looking at this example from Kerala, where people have collected data on the flowering of the species, and we looked at the data to see whether what people are reporting is in fact how correct, whether there are actually any changes happening in the flowering time of this species. So what you see here is this beautiful graph which was made by my colleague Geeta. And what she did was that she plotted, the percentage of trees that were in full bloom during Vishu time. So you see the red vertical lines between 2015 and 2018. These red lines are the Vishu weeks. So the week of Vishu is shown in the red lines here during these 4 years. And she's also plotted the the percentage of trees that were in were flowering between 2015 and 2018. And what she found was that yes, most of the flowering is happening around that Vishu time. But if you look closely enough, 2016 and 2017 especially, you'll see that the peak seems to be happening just before the Vishu week. So just before that, the peak flowering kind of happens, and by the time Vishu comes, the peak has already passed. The peak flowering event has already passed. So this shows that in fact what people were reporting is true, although this is data only for 4 years. And to really understand whether this change is sustained in time, it's a permanent change that has happened in time, we need many more years of information, many more years of data, and from many more trees to truly understand how permanent this change is, and what and how much of a shift has happened in terms of how many days earlier is it happening than expected. So for that, much more data is required. But this is interesting, and this is the kind of thing that we would ideally want to do for many more species. So like I mentioned, for especially for species that we know have some cultural association, like the palash and the neem, or species that have a very important significance for local people, like the mahua. Now here I would like to ask you if you know of any examples from Assam or Northeast where there are these kind of cultural festivals or any particular events that are closely linked to flowering or fruiting time in any particular tree. So please use the chat, and if you're aware of any such association, do type in. I mean, we would really love to know that. So that sort of brings me to the end of today's talk. So I've kind of like given you an overview of SeasonWatch and you know why it's important to study tree phenology, and we've looked at some of the data that has come into SeasonWatch. So of course, generating that information on tree phenology is very important. The data is very important, but the other very equally important aspect of this project is that people go out and just look at trees and get to know trees around them, and they develop love and association. They develop some kind of connection with the nature and the trees around them. So this is a lovely example, a poem that was written by one of our teachers who observes trees in Kerala, and I leave you with this poem. Um, Hopefully you can all see it on your screen. So he says, so many colors, where are they hidden? So many smells, where are they hidden? Are they inside the earth, now and then revealed by a spellwork of trees? So he originally wrote it in Malayalam, and we've tried to like translate it into English so that we can all sort of like understand and enjoy his words. So with that, I thank you all for listening, and quickly to sort of tell you a bit more. SeasonWatch website you can check out seasonwatch.in. You can write to us at sw@seasonwatch.in. We work in different states with our local partners. Seed Matrabhumi in Kerala. Kerala is our largest participant, and Seed Matrabhumi, hats off to them for doing this tremendous groundwork and connecting to schools in Kerala. And that's where most of our participation and data comes from. Then we have regional partners in SCST in Meghalaya, Foundation for Ecological Security in Andhra Pradesh, as well as in Madhya Pradesh, Keystone Foundation in Tamil Nadu. And this season was started in 2010, and this is like a partnership between three organizations: National Center for Biological Sciences in Bangalore, Wipro Foundation as a funding partner, and Nature Conservation Foundation, where it's currently based. So thank you everyone for listening, and I'll stop sharing my screen here, and I hope you can, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box and we can start taking the questions now.
Actually, people can unmute themselves and also ask because there are so few participants. So
yeah, sure. Yes.
And also, please feel free to ask questions about implementing the project. So if you have any questions about observation, about the app, any implementation questions, please do ask.
If any of you were able to try out the app and have any doubts related to that, we can look at that also. So while maybe some of you are thinking of a question, do any of you know of this any particular cultural association with a tree in Assam or elsewhere in the Northeast? Okay, that's nice to know. So Binoy says that during Bohag Bihu in April 13 is when mangoes flower and flowers of foxtail orchid bloom, and the red silk cotton fruits burst during this time. Yeah, that's really lovely to know. Are the flowers and fruits of any particular species used in any celebration? Or maybe there are stories or folk tales, um, you know, about some of these events.
Swati, in most of our religious occasions or like other events, we use betel nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a very important species, no?
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, in folk songs, phenofaces of many species are mentioned. So, like, Bino, you want to unmute and tell a little bit more about that? Um, like, if you could give us some examples, that will be wonderful. Like, if there are, any particular phenofaces that are mentioned, for instance.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hi.
so, uh, so during Bohag Bihu, especially this is because this is a spring season, so many trees used to flower, or and also uh, so in many songs this flowering time of mango, then this jackfruit, then this foxtail orchid. There's they used to be mentioned. So also during the Bohag Bihu, we people used to beat drums like dhols. So in songs, it is mentioned that when we play dhols, this simol tree, it's that fruits used to get burst, and like it used to disperse its seeds while beating the whole.
Oh,
And,
lovely. So that's the mention in the folk song, is it?
yes,
This,
yes.
oh, beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. That is wonderful. So this is during April, right? Mid-April.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
April. But the flowering time of mango, I think nowadays it is getting earlier, and
Hmm.
other things I haven't observed.
Hmm.
That's
So
very interesting.
yeah.
So earlier than Bohag Bihu, you're saying?
Yes, yes. It's in 13th, 14th of April.
Hmm.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be flowering in April time, mid-April. And how early are you observing now?
Not much, I think. Little bit earlier, because uh, it should give flowers during this time, but it used
Hmm.
nowadays that fruits used to come like small fruits.
Oh, so you're saying that I mean, it's supposed to be flowering during Bohag Bihu, but you now notice that there are small unripe fruits by that time.
Yes.
Okay, that's very interesting observation. Yeah.
And the amount is also decreasing day by day, in fact.
The you mean of the fruits?
Yeah, fruits.
Yeah.
Mango and many other fruits.
Yeah, interesting. No, I mean, this is
Hmm.
something that our like teachers from Kerala are also observing this thing about reduction in the amount of fruiting.
Yes, yes.
And we have a teammate who's not here today, Krishna.
Mm.
She's looking into this very aspect actually, mango
Mhm.
fruiting, and finding some very interesting things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so data from Kerala is showing that at least in 2020 and 2021, there has been much less than usual flowering. So in the past 2 years at least, it's
Hmm.
been much less than usual.
Okay. It's happening everywhere, I think.
Yeah. Like it's nice to know this also from, because a lot of this is anecdotal also at the
Hmm.
moment. So I mean, it's still very important to know that. So no questions today.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Vinay.
So I just downloaded the app and trying to see. So for every state, is the list of the trees are different, or say,
So
it's best?
so the list is common for across India, but what we do is that for we try to add species that are represented. So there are some species that were added specially for Assam, but it's in the common list. So when you access the species list, you'll see the entire list actually. So you'll have to scroll down and find the tree species that is you're interested in monitoring. So I think you'll have a total of close to 140 species right now, and most of them are very common species that are found across India. So either fruit trees like mango, jackfruit, that are planted, and or some that are locally important. So like we have mahua for central India, we have rhododendron for the Himalayas, and for Assam, I think we've added
Holong, I think.
along, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thanks, yeah. So what we would like to do also is that if you can take a look at the list, and if you feel that there are some species that are very common locally, they're very abundant regionally, you can let us know.
Is it possible to see the graphs and these trends of
Yes.
any from the website or from the app also?
App, it's not possible, but you can see on the website. So you can go to the website and let me see if I'll maybe do that once. Just give me a moment.
I'll share the link in the chat and you can
Okay.
show it on the screen.
Oh yeah. So I'm just gonna open. So I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this is the home page. You can go to explore, and there you can. So first, I'll just show you. This is a species list. So there are. You can look at the entire list of species here. So we have currently 130 odd species. So you can go through the list, and we have we have Olong somewhere. So yeah, basically you can just scroll down and you can look at the species list. To look at the
hold on.
data, you can go to patterns. So you go to explore and then patterns. And here you can look at, there are different things. So we've organized the data in different ways. You can look at what are the trees or which species are being observed. So if you open any of these, you see these different sections. You can open any of these and look at patterns in more detail. So if you Binoy, I think you might be asking about phenology pattern in species, right?
Yes.
Are you? Yeah, okay. So for that, you can go to explore pattern here on map. So I hope you can see this whole thing. So you here you basically can enter any species that you're interested in looking. So right now we although we've started the project in 2010, only from 2014 onwards we've kind of started having sufficient data for some of these species. So you can definitely look at common species. So let's say we want to look at mango. So you can you'll have to go to you have to use the scientific name. That's how the explore page the tab is organized. So you look at mango, Mangifera indica, and these are the different phases. So you can look at any of these one by one. So let's say we want to look at ripe fruits, and we are looking. You can select all India, so that is called all states, or you can look at any particular state also. So let's try all states first. And then you can select what is a time period that you want to, you're interested in. So the default here is set at, the from date is set at 2014, because that's where, most of our data, sort of good data or sufficient data is. And we can look at maybe present date, up to present date, and we can submit a query. So now in the map, you can see all the trees here, trees that were monitored during this time. And you can see that, how Kerala is completely yellow. So, there are these circles, each circle is a tree, and Kerala is completely colored. This is where most of our information comes from, and you can zoom in and look at it more closely. And this is the graph on the left side. So the percentage of trees that were showing this particular phenophase that we have selected fruiting. So from you can from 2014 till 2021, right? So you can see that it's difficult now to kind of tell exactly which month it's happening, but you can see the peak here. You can go to the peak and observe. So in 2014 the peak is happening in April. That is when most of the trees were fruiting, in April. And here in 2021 the peak fruiting is happening in June. So you can see that how it's you can look at it in more detail and see how it changes from year to year. The peak fruiting seems to be different in different months of the year. And you can play around with the data here. So let's look at Assam, if we have any information from Assam on mango. And we have one observation, I think. So actually there are Yeah, in 2017, someone has observed a mango tree in Assam. So we have lots to catch up on there. So most of the data, like I mentioned, is coming from Kerala and southern parts of the country, and very little data from elsewhere. So when I looked at when I showed you all state, you could see that that there are large gaps. Yeah. So yeah, you can use this explore page to look at many different things. You can also check out where people are participating from. You can look at some recent observations. So if you go to observations, you can check out what people are seeing and where. So that's also something interesting to look at. It's taking time to load, but yeah, so maybe I'll stop share again. Okay, it's coming. Yeah, so you can look at this table and see that there are observations from yesterday. So this gets updated every 24 hours. And so you can see that, all of yesterday's observations have come in, and people have looked at different trees: coconut, teak, mango, guava, curry leaf. And then you can see who the observer is, where where that information is coming from. So a lot of it is coming from Kerala. And a lot of schools, so GHSS, Infant Jesus, these are schools, and individuals are also participating. You can see what they saw also. So you can, these icons basically can tell you, they show which phenophase was observed and what quantity of phenophase was observed. So I hope you all explore the website, and yeah, look at explore page. I'll stop sharing.